Mr. President, General Eisenhower has taken a crack at the national budget. He told Charlie Halleck in a letter that he thought it could be reduced by about $13 billion. The general was especially critical of your space program. He said that there were enormous sums being wasted in that field. Would you care to comment?
Well, I think that President Eisenhower referred us to Morris Stamms, his budget director, for guidance. And I've examined that record. Under Morris Stamms, this country had the largest peacetime deficit in history, took a $500 million surplus and put it into a $12.5 billion deficit, had the largest outflow of gold and dollars in our history, 1959, about $3.9 billion. We had two recessions, 1958 and 1960, and we had the highest peacetime unemployment, 1959, since World War II. That's not a record that we plan to duplicate if we can help it. Now, secondly, the United States Congress almost unanimously made a decision that the United States would not continue to be second in space. We are second in space today because we started late. It requires a large sum of money. I don't think we should look with equanimity upon the prospect that we will be second all through the 60s and possibly the 70s. We have the potential not to be. I think that having made the decision last year that we should make a major effort to be first in space, I think we should continue to do so. Now, President Eisenhower this is not a new position for him. He has disagreed with this, I know, at least a year and a half ago, when the Congress took a different position. So he's not, it's a position I think he took from the time of Sputnik on, but it's a matter in which we disagree. So I think may be that there's waste in the space budget. If there's waste, then I think it ought to be cut out by the Congress, and I'm sure it will be. But if we're getting to the question of whether we should be reconciled ourselves to a slow pace in space, I don't think so. This administration has concentrated its attention since it came into office in strengthening our military. That's one of the reasons why you could not possibly put in the cut, which has been recommended, $9 or $10 billion, without cutting the heart out of the military budget. The fact of the matter is, when we came into office, we had 11 combat-ready divisions. We now have 16. We increased the scheduling on Polaris nearly double per year. We've increased the number of planes on the 15-minute alert from 33% of our strategic air force to 50%, and in a whole variety of ways. In the Navy, we've added about 46 vessels. We've strengthened ourselves. Defense and space. The fact of the matter is, in the non-defense, non-space expenditures, we've put in less of an increase in our 3 years than President Eisenhower did in his last 3 years. I'm concerned that we may not be putting in enough, rather than we're putting in too much, because the population of this country is growing, 4 million people a year. So that I think that we ought to go ahead with what we're talking about. We ought to have effective, tight budget control, which we've tried to have. The Congress may be able to improve on it. But this idea that you can cut that budget wholesale without cutting very essential national programs, and number two, taking $9 billion out of the economy, is just bound, in my opinion, to put you into an economic decline instead of a rise. So I think we ought to recognize that the percentage of our budget expenditures as a percentage of our gross national product are about the same as they were all through the 50s. The budget may have gone up because the country's growing and the population's growing, but so is our gross national product. And the debt as a percentage of our gross national product steadily declining. So I think we're in good position, providing we can prevent an economic decline of the kind we had very rapidly, 58 and then 60. And I think we can do that if we have effective programs of the dimensions that we're talking about, plus the tax cut. Because we have to have, just to keep the number of, to absorb the people coming into the labor market, we have to have a $25 billion increase in our gross national product just to absorb the people coming into the labor market, let alone cut down the number who are now unemployed. So that's my view of that matter. Thank you.